Bhakti Swami ki jai. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Asto Tarasata Sri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Sikaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Gadadhar Sri Vas Adi Gora Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. My Purnavadvip Dham ki jai. Mai Mun Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gora devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I think your bandwidth is slightly low today. Although we don't like it, if you turn off your video, it might get a little bit better.
Hare Krishna. Sorry about that. I think I have to get closer to the source. Hopefully this gets better.
It is a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay. I have to now just find a good spot to sit. Just thought I'd do it. My okay. I'm unstable again. No, I see head shaking. Vinjavali's head shaking. No.
Still breaking up.
How about, okay, how are we doing now?
That was good.
How about like here?
I think so. I mean, you have to speak for a few minutes for us to tell.
Oh, right. That's true.
Goes in and out.
That's true. Okay. So what I'll do, I think I'll stop the video. That usually helps. And then if hopefully everything will be okay. Let's just get as close as possible here. And is this? Yes, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, sorry. So Hare Krishna, welcome everyone. We continue our study of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 9th chapter. Today we are on text number 46. Tasya niharanad, let's see. Tasya niharanadani nadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhisthira karayitva muhurtam dukito bhavat. Tasya niharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhisthira karayitva muhurtam dukito bhavat. Tasya niharanadini sampare tasya bhargava Yudhishthira karayitva muhurtam dukito bhavat. Please chant.
Hare Krishna. Tasya nirharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhishthiraha karayitva muhurtaha dukhito bhavat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Tasya nirhanadini samparetasya bhargava yudhishthiraha karayitva muhurtam dukhito bhavat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Go ahead, Prabhu.
Please, Prabhu, go ahead.
Tasya nirharanadini samparatasya bhargava yadhishthira karayitva mahuritam dukhito bhavat. Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Tasya nirharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhishthira karayitva muhurtam dukhita bhavat. Hare Krishna.
Tasya niraharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhishthira karayitva muhurtam dukkito bhavat. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Tasya niharanadini samparityasya bhargava yudhishthira karayatva muhurtam dukhito bhavat. Hare Krishna.
Tasya niraharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhishthira karayitva muhurtam dukhito bhavat.
Hare Krishna. Tasya niharanadini sampare tasya bhargava yudhishthira karayitva muhurtam dukhito abhavat. Hare Krishna.
Anyone else? Okay. Tasya, his. Nirharana Adini, funeral ceremony. Samparetasya, of the dead body. Bhargava, O descendant of Brigu. Yudhishthira, Maharaj Yudhishthira. Karayitva, having performed it. Muhurtam, for a moment. Dukkitaha, sorry. Abhavat, became. Translation. O descendant of Brigu, Shaunika, after performing funeral rituals for the dead body of Bhishma Dev, Maharaj Yudhishthira was momentarily overtaken with grief. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Bhishma Dev was not only a great family head of Maharaj Yudhishthira, but also he was a great philosopher and friend to him, his brothers, and his mother. Since Maharaj Pandu, the father of the 5 brothers headed by Maharaj Yudhishthira, had died, Bhishma Dev was the most affectionate grandfather of the Pandavas and caretaker of the widowed daughter-in-law Kunti Devi. Although Maharaj Dhritarashtra, the elder uncle of Maharaj Yudhishthira, was there to look after him, his affection was more on the side of his 100 sons headed by Duryodhana. Ultimately, a colossal clique was fabricated to deprive the 5 fatherless brothers of the rightful claim of the kingdom of Hastinapur. There was great intrigue common in imperial palaces, and the 5 brothers were exiled to the wilderness. But Bhishma Dev was always a sincerely sympathetic well-wisher, grandfather, friend, and philosopher to Maharaj Yudhishthira, even up to the last moment of his life. He died very happily by seeing Maharaj Yudhishthira to the throne. Otherwise, he would have long ago quitted his material body instead of suffering agony over the undue sufferings of the Pandavas. He was simply waiting for the opportune moment because he was sure and certain that the sons of Pandu would come out victorious on the battle of Kurukshetra, as his lordship, Sri Krishna, was their protector. As a devotee of the Lord, he knew that the Lord's devotee cannot become vanquished at any time. Maharaj Yudhishthira was quite aware of all these good wishes of Bhishma Dev, and therefore he must have been feeling the great separation. He was sorry for the separation of a great soul and not for the material body which Bhishma Dev relinquished. The funeral ceremony was a necessary duty, although Bhishma Dev was a liberated soul. Since Bhishma Dev was without issue, the eldest grandson, namely Maharaj Yudhishthira, was the rightful person to perform this ceremony. It was a great boon to Bhishma Dev that an equally great son of the family undertook the last rites of a great man. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminata Namane Namaste Sarasvate Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarne Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpa Trubhyas Chakrapa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna, everyone. So I apologize that my internet connection is not very good this morning. The place where I usually go to use the internet, there are guests staying there, so I didn't want to disturb them. So here I am in the woods behind another neighbor's house, trying not to disturb them. So hopefully this will work. I apologize for not having video. It seems to be diminishing the quality of the transmission. So today we're going to talk about a few things because today is also the appearance day of Srimati Sita Devi and Srimati Janava Devi. But first, before we get to talking about these very wonderful and powerful Vaishnavis, we're going to talk a little bit about grief, which is what today's Bhagavatam verse is speaking of. So we don't really need a recap because we've been talking about this for a long time. Yudhishthira, he was despondent. This is the super short recap. He went to hear Bhishma Dev speak while he was on his deathbed of arrows. And then now he's performing the funeral rites, and he has this momentary grief period that he has. Muhurta means just a moment. So grief, just like anything else, can be used in Krishna's service. There are things that we think, due to our conditioning, there are things that we think in this material world that are either inherently good or inherently bad. And both of those are actually illusion. Nothing is inherently good or bad in this material world. Everything can either be used for Krishna's service, or it can be used to forget Krishna. These are the only two options with everything, no matter what it is. Now, there are things that we generally perceive as inherently negative or inherently positive. So inherently negative things that we generally perceive are like grief, anger, resentment, jealousy, things like that. These have a negative tone, whereas, happiness, jubilation, things like that, they have a sort of positive overtone, because to the material senses, we feel nicer, more pleasant when we have joy and pleasure and things like that. And then it's more suffering when we're undergoing grief and things like that. But in the absolute realm, in the transcendental world, anything is used in, actually everything, not just anything, everything is used in Krishna service. So here we shouldn't think that because Maharaj Yudhishthira is momentarily overtaken with grief, that he's still showing signs of weakness, even after hearing all these instructions of Bhishma Dev. We shouldn't think that he's being sentimental. But one thing that we should definitely notice is that this grief, it's just momentary. In other words, the grief is used as long as it helps him serve Krishna. And then after that, it's given up. So he's remembering the great personality of Bhishma Dev. He's appreciating all of the things, all of the different instructions that Bhishma Dev has given to him, all the protection that he's given to the Pandava brothers. And he's regretting that he won't have those personally anymore, but he's understanding that everything that Bhishma Dev gave in his life was such a positive factor that, to grieve too long would be a disservice to Bhishma Dev's sacrifice and to everything that he lived for. So therefore the grief is there, it's natural. He feels some separation from his well-wisher, but it just lasts as far as it takes for him to maintain that appreciation of him and to inspire him to learn from those lessons that Bhishma Dev has imparted to him, right? And so, like I said, anything can be used in Krishna's service. Grief, anger, things like that. What I've observed in recent years is that grief is something that people in the material world now, in this current age, they like to put on display. It's almost as if it's a competition as to see who's going through the most grief. When I see people, when I meet people, or whatever the situation is, whatever the social situation is, I've observed that people tend to be talking about all the different calamities that have been put upon them in recent times. Oh yeah, this is going on with my health, and then my oldest son, he got in trouble with the law, so now I'm dealing with that, and then I got these fines, and my house burnt down, half of the and it's just piling up, the calamity after calamity. And what happens is then anyone who's listening is saying, oh well, that's nothing. I have so many more calamities, so much more grief, and it's almost like I said, it's like a competition. And so this is certainly not healthy grief. It doesn't help anyone. And in a similar way, even the things that we perceive in the material world as positive, like joy, happiness, jubilation, things like that, they in themselves, again, they're not necessarily positive. If we're joyous, but we're not connecting our joy to Krishna, if we're just glad that we have a certain level of sense gratification and we're just happy with that, then that joy is not actually a positive thing. It's perceived as positive to us because we identify with the body and the senses and the mind, and so we feel that it's a good thing. But in actuality, in the absolute realm, it's not a good thing unless it's connected to Krishna. So whether something is perceived as positive or negative in this world has no actual value unless it is connected to Krishna. So whether we're experiencing external happiness or distress, if said happiness or distress is not centered around Krishna and actually helping us to develop our Krishna consciousness and to relinquish our self-centric mentality, then it's of no value. So this is something that we talk about often. We talk about principle versus details. The principle is always something, is whether it's being actually used for Krishna service or whether we're using it for our own sense gratification. And the details are just, what exactly we're dealing with. So today we're talking about grief. So as I mentioned, grief can be used in Krishna service to inspire us, to appreciate something that is now gone. In this case, it's a person. We've actually this year, or in the last few years, have lost many great personalities. And it's okay to grieve about these personalities to the extent that it actually helps us move forward in our devotional life. We can regret that we didn't get as much association as we wanted to from these individuals. But then we have to realize, okay, now there are other individuals that we can get association from. And I've learned my lesson. I shouldn't squander these opportunities. I should take advantage of these opportunities while they're available. So instead of grieving for those who are gone for an extensive period of time, which is beyond what is helpful to our Krishna consciousness, we just use that to understand and to appreciate not only the service that these great souls have left behind and their examples and instructions, but also the examples and instructions of their peers who are also doing the same thing. So we don't have to wait until the person is gone and then grieve over them and then live a life of regret and lamentation that, now I can't possibly advance in spiritual consciousness because, this person is now gone, right? So again, the key word here is muhurta, for a moment. So the grief, like I said, it's to the extent that it's actually inspiring us to move on in our Krishna consciousness. Anything beyond that is to be left to the side. And that's the same again with everything. If we find ourselves feeling joy, jubilation like that all the time, but we see that we don't have it connected to Krishna, that we're just, happy about our material situation, that is also something that is to be left behind. We have to understand that being joyful about these things isn't actually helping on our spiritual path. It's comfortable, it's nice, but it isn't helping us get our ultimate goal. And so we always have to assess and analyze our personal situations to see if we're actually progressing in spiritual life. And this is the way that we can identify that. Okay, so before we start talking about Mother Sita Devi and Mother Janava Devi, I just want to see if there are any questions about today's verse and about grief in general, or anything that was said. Any further discussion on this matter before we continue? See anything yet? It's one of those topics where it's in one sense it's easy to understand, but in another sense it's hard to practice, because with our material emotions and our material conditioning, grief, it feels bad and joy feels good to us. So even though we can understand that either can be transcendental or material, that's easy to understand in theory, but still in practice it's difficult for us to really apply, because when we identify with the body, we like feeling pleasure and we don't like feeling pain, right? Or like I said, sometimes these days we brag about our grief because it gives us pleasure because we have more grief than others. It's still that feeling of superiority. So even though it's, talking about grief, it's, they feel good that they're the most grievous people there are. So yeah, it gets a little complicated, but anyway, it seems that if there are no questions or further discussion about that, then it's clear enough, I suppose. So we will move on and we will talk about Mother Sita Devi and Mother Janava Devi. So most of us are very familiar with Mother Sita Devi. She is the Lord's internal potency. So when we talk about Srimati Radharani and Srimati Sita Devi, most people don't realize this or recognize this, but when we talk about her, she's capital H, she capital S. She's a she's not an ordinary person. She's not separate from the Lord. She is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna and Radharani cannot be separated. And this can what's the word I'm looking for? I lost the word I was looking for. Anyway, this esoteric is the word I was looking for. As soon as I gave up, I remembered it. So it's a fairly esoteric subject matter. It's not something that can be necessarily logically discussed. It can be to an extent, but then you can't come to a necessarily logical conclusion, because we're talking about absolute matters and we're talking about rasa. So all we need to know is that when we talk about Srimati Radharani, Srimati Sita Devi, that she is the Lord's internal potency. She's non-different from the Supreme Lord. She's not Vishnu Tattva, she's Shakti Tattva. The Lord, since he's transcendental, he's neither masculine nor feminine in the sense that we recognize in the material world, but he has a transcendentally masculine and transcendentally feminine side to him. He is the Shakti Man, or the source of all energy, and she is the Shakti, the energy itself. And so these things are dealt with in a different way. These things act in a different way, the source of all energy and the energy itself. So there is a difference in that sense, but they're inseparable. So Srimati Sita Devi, very, very important personality. She cannot be separated from Lord Ramachandra. You can't just say Lord Ram without understanding that Sita Devi is part of him. So Sita Devi, so as I mentioned, most of us know at least of Sita Devi, eternal consort of Lord Ram. These are eternal pastimes, always happening. And of course, we know her as the dutiful wife of Lord Ram, who is the king of dharmic kings. So if you run into any standard Hindu personality, they will very much respect Lord Ram. They may not respect Lord Krishna, because Lord Krishna doesn't always follow dharma, but they do respect Lord Ram. So pious people who don't necessarily understand the mellows of the rasas, they will appreciate Lord Ram more than they will appreciate Lord Krishna, because it's more difficult for a pious person to distinguish from material things and transcendental things. So they appreciate a deity who is in their perception more materially dharmic, who follows the laws properly, like that. And so Sita Devi, being the wife of the dharmic deity, she's also very dutiful. So we know her story. She married Lord Ramachandra, and then when Lord Ramachandra was banished to the woods, to the forest for a period of time, she went with him. She gave up all of her royal opulence. Well, the servants actually followed them for a bit, but then they turned them away. But she gave up all these comforts and all this opulence just to be with Lord Ram. They're inseparable. And so most of us know the story of Sita Devi. Many of us do not know the story of Janava, because Janava Devi, she's mentioned, but she's not discussed a lot by Srila Prabhupada. But when he does discuss her, he reveres her very highly. So Janava Devi, just as Sita Devi is the internal potency of Lord Rama, Janava Devi is the internal potency of Lord Nityananda. And in Vrindavan pastimes, she is Ananga Manjari. That's Srimati Radharani's little sister. So just as Krishna has his own internal potency in Radharani, Balaram also has his internal potency, his you would say his feminine nature, his energy, right? And so he's the source of the energy, and he's the energetic, and she's the energy. And so Lord Nityananda also has his internal potency, and that's Janava. And so when Srila Prabhupada would mention her, she's very highly revered. So she was the wife of Lord Nityananda, and she actually was the Acharya of all the Bengali Vaishnavas after Lord Chaitanya left. Of all the Vaishnavas in Bengal, she was actually organizing all of them. She pretty much ran everything. She was the Acharya of the Vaishnavas at that time. So she would go, for example, on pilgrimages, and she would take all the devotees with her. So she'd go to Vrindavan and various other places. And she arranged through Jiva Goswami to take all of the literatures that the other Goswamis of Vrindavan had compiled in Vrindavan and bring them to Bengal so that the devotees there could study. There's also a famous festival that she went to in Keturi. So there was a big festival there in Keturi, which was actually considered the first Gora Purnima festival. So that's where they honored Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his first Gora Purnima festival. And at that time, the Gaudiyas sort of had these different levels of realization. So they would be preaching, and they'd be preaching Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but there'd be these subtle differences. And so she actually is credited to bringing all of those together and explaining how each of them were correct in themselves, but not quite complete. So she completed all of them. Similar to how Lord Chaitanya, when he took the ideas of the four sampradayas and brought them all together with the Chinta Beta Beta Tattva, in a similar way, not exactly the same way, but she saw she understood that, the different presentations of the philosophies among the Gaudiyas, and then brought them all together and got everyone on the same page so they were understanding properly. And so she is a highly revered personality. She is one of the only. There are a few others. It's always an exception to the rule of female acharyas. And so we revere her very highly. So both of these personalities, Sita Devi and Janava Devi, again, super potent Vaishnavis that we can certainly learn from their examples and appreciate like that. It seems that it looks like I've reached the end way earlier than I normally do. This week's been a little busy, so I apologize for that. Normally I have a whole lot of notes and I can't even get through them, but today it looks like I got to the end of what I needed to say. But let's see if we can open up for discussion, or if anyone has any other stories. There's lots of stories about Mother Sita Devi and of Mother Janava Devi. If anyone wants to share any of those, that would be fantastic. Or if there are any questions in general, comments, additions. I'm starting to wonder if everyone is hearing. So I'm in a bad connection.
No, actually, your audio is really good.
Okay.
Maybe if you turned on your camera now, it may not, it may be okay.
I'll try.
Yeah, so please, anybody who has any reflections, please unmute yourself and go ahead. I was just thinking about, we are always talking about women and women's position in society and everything, but you can see how highly women were regarded. And it was not in terms of, the gender, but what it is they were capable of doing. She was an acharya. I mean, how much higher can you go than that in giving somebody respect? I wish we were not so convoluted, so misguided as we are these days in how to value women. Now we just value women in how much they are able to do what men can do. I mean, they're not valued for who they are, but only in comparison to men. So, so it was really good to hear about Sita Devi and Mother Janava, especially together. Both of them earned that much respect because of the choices they made and how they lived their lives. And the topic of grief, as you had said, it is easy to say, but really tough to practice. Whenever somebody passes away, the way I hear it is, oh, poor thing, he passed away. What do you mean, poor thing, he passed away? Or how unfortunate he passed away? Who are we to decide when somebody should pass away? They passed away when they were meant to pass away, when it was ordained for them to pass away. And for us to say poor thing, and I could never understand, especially when my father passed away, a few people had said that, and then somebody explained that because now he's not here in his material body enjoying material senses.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, to
Poor
talk about being misguided and seeing things the wrong way, and how deeply we associate with the body and not with the soul.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, generally, at least in my experience, when people sort of express that regret, it's more for the people that are still alive. Oh, you're going to miss this person. You don't have their association anymore. But yeah, sometimes it is just, oh, poor fellow can't enjoy anymore. Yeah, and that's unfortunate.
Anybody else? Mother Archana Bhakti is here. Golokananda Mataji.
Yeah, I apologize that I wasn't more organized today.
You had a lot of good points. I think some classes just are meant for us to really meditate on and think. Like I was asking Parikshit Prabhu yesterday, how do we, I asked him a question and he said, meditate on it and have some introspection, go within and think. And these are classes for us to actually think about how to apply these in our own lives, not in a theoretical, don't take that kind of a stance. What is it that I need to do, or what changes do I need to make, and how do I correct myself if I'm not making good choices? I mean, Sita Devi's choices, will I be able to do it? Or how should I practice it? It's not imitate them, but follow them.
Yeah, I have a friend. He's actually the person that lives in the house who I'm trying not to disturb. He oftentimes comes up with these theoretical situations. If I had this or I had that, then I could do that. Come up with these things. But what about what we do have? You have something, so you could do something. Mm-hmm. So instead of living on these theoretical things of or if this was a situation, then basically in our minds we can solve all of the world's problems if we only had the right ingredients. But the thing is, we have all sorts of ingredients that we can do something with, but the point is, are we doing anything with them or not? And we have everything we need to get out of this material world, and that's the important thing. The important thing is not to make this material world comfortable. This material world is exactly how comfortable it's meant to be. it starts out in the golden age very comfortable, and then it gets less and less comfortable as time goes on, and we're in Kali Yuga. And this is exactly how comfortable the world's meant to be. We can pray as long as we want for more comfort, and it's not going to come because we don't have the piety for it. We came in Kali Yuga, but we have these great opportunities where, we can take advantage of the Sankirtan movement, and, we can forego all of the rest of the of the processes that would get us to where we can get to just by chanting Hare Krishna. So in one sense, we're quite fortunate. It looks like there are some hands up.
Yes, Kalpesh Prabhu, and I think Suman Mataji also had unmuted herself. But Prabhu, I think you might have to turn off the camera again. Sometimes your answer is...
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Go ahead, Kalpesh Prabhu or Sonia Mataji.
Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for this class and giving some information on grave. Appreciate that a lot. I have one of the reference, Bhagavad Gita 2.28. All created beings are unmanifested in the beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifested again when annihilated. So what they need is there for lamentation. So I think so. This is like something similar, right? When there was a dilemma with Arjuna, he considered himself as a body. That's where the classification of the body comes: subtle,
Right.
casual, gross, and all. So we are not the body; we are the soul. So that was one of the point I thought like we should be covering on this because
Yes.
we identify that as a thing, then I think so the things get easier and easier because I see that if that identification is incorrect, then it's like a compounding mistake because 2 + 2 is equals to 5. So all the activities or identities or whatever we engaged, it's wrong because the basis of it's wrong. So that was the one point I want to add. But I have a question because we see in the world way we perceive the world, and there is a objective reality and there is a subjective reality. Subjective reality we perceive through our lens of our mind, basically what we have gathered and accumulated impressions or so what would be the attributes or qualities for serving Krishna consciousness in living in this subjective reality and not getting entangled with like because it's like it's a let's say I'm taking brinjal as an example, so if we see brinjal, someone would say this is very delicious and someone would say no, this is insane, I don't like it. So that's what the reality is, right? Subjective reality is that one perceives it differently, other perceives it differently. So having known that the brinjal has nothing to do with it because that's the object, right? So so how do we perceive in terms of what would be the attributes? I know in a very brief way, like it could be like not having desires, or maybe having only desires for Krishna, or attachment towards Krishna only, not getting hankering, lamentation, fear, aspirations, probably practicing some kind of optimism, which will be like to give a successful outcomes. It could be contentment, it could be tolerance, determination, but these are again, it's so mixed in the emotion. Like if we do something, how do we not make sure like it's not it's a desire for my body? So I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm saying it a lot, but how do we really serve Krishna, knowing the subjective reality is also a part of how we perceive through our lens of minds, and what we accumulate, how would we make sure that is an absolute versus and also I see many times, like in situation, there is a common tendency, if somebody is not devotee or somebody is not Krishna conscious, there is an conclusions made or some kind of that we start looking at the faults of others. That's our first natural error that happens to me, at least. So if you can share some of your perspective or from the scriptures, what they have to say.
Thank you. So first, I thank you for adding that point from Bhagavad Gita, that all created beings, there's nothing worthy of lamentation because they're unmanifested and they're manifest and they're not. So nothing really is dead. Now Yudhishthir's lamentation was different because he was lamenting for the association that he had. So he actually made that spiritual connection. He wasn't lamenting for the loss of the body. And then that actually goes into what you were asking, the subjective and objective. So materially speaking, there's subjective and objective, like you were mentioning with Brinda, what was it, Brindle? Whatever it was that, some people.
Eggplant. Sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Eggplant. There you go. Yeah. Some people like it. Some people don't. Some people can't tolerate it because their livers can't, unless if it's cooked in oil. If they have a bad liver, they can't even eat it. It's super bad for them, but it's, whatever. So yeah, it's subjective and objective. So just as I was mentioning earlier, in this material world, we think things are inherently good and inherently bad. We think joy is good, lamentation is bad, because of the way it makes us feel. So there's that subjective and objective. But then there's subjective and objective transcendence. So there are activities that we can do that are good for transcendence, that are good for spiritual life. But it doesn't mean the activity itself is a spiritual activity. If it's not connected to Krishna within our consciousness, if our motive isn't to serve Krishna while doing said activity, then objectively it's of no value, even though we're doing the activity. Even if we know that there is a connection, if we're not doing it with that intent, then it's objectively not, it doesn't have, well, it's got a little bit of value if we at least know, like, so for example, cleaning the temple room, we understand, okay, this is the temple room, this is Krishna's temple room, and he likes it clean, so I'm cleaning it. And so we could be consciously aware that doing this is serving Krishna, and so we're going to get a little bit of spiritual benefit for that. But if we're actually doing it for Krishna, like we actually want to clean Krishna's temple room because, not for anything for us, but for him, there's a difference there in the consciousness, in the intention. And so that's how we can determine whether our actions, our thoughts, our words are pure or not. If we're actually doing them with the intention to serve Krishna, or if we're doing it to get some sort of self-satisfaction, self-aggrandizement like that out of it. Now, of course, when we do actually serve Krishna, we will be satisfied. That will come. But if we're doing it to get that satisfaction, then that's not Krishna consciousness. That's Mishra. That's mixed. It's bhakti. It's there, but it's mixed with something else. And so our goal is to get rid of all of the different tinges that we have. And we have a lot of them. We're materially conditioned. So the process helps us identify where our intention is impure and how to then make that intention pure. And that's the process of Krishna consciousness. I know that's a simple answer to what seemed like a complicated question, but did that address that in your?
Yeah, no, I think so. This helps serving Krishna and thinking about him and doing it rather than for our own satisfaction. Then the satisfaction is a natural consequence of it. But instead, having the satisfaction in the mind and doing it, that's an entanglement. even though serving doesn't, it's not a serving. But
Right.
the
So we-
process, I think so. You made a very good point.
Yeah.
The process helps us to detect what are our defects, and probably we can work on it. We are sincere enough. So
Yeah, we see that the most sincere devotees,
Mhm.
they don't care about their comfort. You know,
Mhm.
we look
Good
at Lord
point.
Chaitanya's final prayers as, you know, let the Lord ignore me or trample me or handle me roughly in his embrace. He's my Lord, birth after birth. I know no other Lord, you know, that's it. So if we
Very
start
good.
developing this attitude, then we're in good shape. If we only serve when it suits us, when it's convenient for us, or when we get some sort of reward, or if we get our name on a plaque, then okay, it's good, we're serving Krishna. But are we truly serving Krishna? You know, we're doing something and it's for Krishna indirectly. That's good. It's helping us. But if we want the true goal, we need to get more toward, you know, no matter what happens, even if I die, even if I'm stuck in hellish conditions for the rest of eternity, as long as I get to serve Krishna. So when we start getting that attitude, more that attitude, then, oh yeah, I'll clean the temple room as long as I, you know, as long as you announce it in Mangalarti the next morning and tell people how good of a job I did, you know, or like that, or as long as I, you know, get some liberation out of it. Even that's not a sincere desire. But
No, excellent point.
it's a good starting point. It's, you know, if you're gonna try to work a system, try to work Krishna's system, you know, then you'll eventually you'll stop trying to work the system and you'll actually start serving Krishna. You know, that's how the process works. It's purifying. So even if we have ill intent, just doing it, just saying Krishna's name, that's purifying. So it takes away all of that. So basically, whatever we're doing in serving Krishna, continue doing that, but we should always strive toward getting toward that mentality of, you know, this is all I want to do, and I don't care what the result is. This is what I'm going to do regardless, and that's Krishna consciousness.
True. Hey, can you also express something about the faults, looking at the faults, even though they are not Krishna conscious? How do people overcome that fault? I use this technique by free from ill will towards all living being, because everything which manifests, unmanifested, whatever we can perceive and we cannot perceive, all is the body of the God. Even though he associates with maybe some different faith system, we should have the appreciation that it's like if I have to show you what it is, then it is like my body, and I'm worshiping my hand. Somebody's worshiping my hand, whereas I'm worshiping the whole body, right? So in that case, I see it that everything is a fragment of God. So why even see that difference, that he is not a devotee or he's not even a Krishna conscious, and stop looking at the faults of others. That is how I'm mentally training myself. I'm not capable of doing those fully, but I mean, if you have any better way or better techniques, like one who is not devotee, or maybe because he's still devotee to something, but
Well,
it's still a fragment.
Yeah. So my policy and things like that are that, you know, Krishna gave us free will, and so he's not upset when we're exercising our free will to forget him, and so we shouldn't be upset by that either. If Krishna's not upset by it, we shouldn't be. Now we can encourage people to follow their particular faith better, more accurately. That's something that Srila Prabhupada did. He said it doesn't matter what faith you are, just whatever you call God, continue saying that name over and over and over again, like that. So that's generally my policy. I mean, there are different things that we can do. Of course, preaching is a valuable thing, but the most valuable preaching that I've seen in my experience is preaching by example. That's what Acharya means. So if we want to help change others' consciousness, that, you know, we start with ourselves, and then when we change our consciousness, then you know, our qualities, in fifth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, I think it's 18th chapter, verse 12. It says that all the qualities of the demigods become automatically manifest in someone who practices bhakti. So if we do put our attention on ourselves and cultivate ourselves in bhakti, then all of these qualities that everybody's trying to accumulate, they're trying to acquire for material reasons, but nonetheless, they're trying to acquire them. When they see that a devotee has those qualities, then they start thinking, okay, well, I knew that person when they didn't have the qualities, and now they do. So I'm gonna find out why they have them now, because I want them. And then that's the best preaching, because then they see, okay, well, all they did was follow this process and it worked for them. It could work for me. And so maybe they'll do it, maybe they won't. They'll still use their free will on that. But that's my general policy. But you know, there's everyone has different preaching methods. But yeah,
No,
generally
I
I find,
I
yeah.
agree. Yep. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Sure. Hare Krishna. There was another hand up, and then it
Yeah.
went down. Suman. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Very nice class. I noted down that connect everything with Krishna, then there is value. Everything else is
Yes.
left behind. It is comfortable, but it is not important to achieve our goal. So sometimes really find difficult. Suppose at work, we have to focus on our work, how to figure out there's something. Then that time we don't think about Krishna, we think about finding out the solution. So that time, so find it difficult sometimes. And this is a question, and I want to talk about the Sita Devi. Sita Devi was very compassionate. She was very compassionate. There's one example I remember when she was sitting in the Ashok one, and she was guarded by the Rakshasis appointed by Ravan. And when Hanumanji came to see her, and when he saw that those Rakshasis were trying to give her trouble and trying to give her fear, and he was he got angry and he wanted to punish them. But Sita Devi told him not to punish them. She said that it is not their fault, and Ravana appointed them, and they are doing their work because of Ravana's instruction. So she was very compassionate about those Rakshasis also. So that I remember, that her compassionate. And there are many other examples. She was very compassionate.
I was also I was just reminded in a private message. I wanted to talk about this, but I didn't. It's in the matter of Sita Devi. So Lord Chaitanya, when he was traveling through South India, he came upon a Brahmana, and so which he did. You know, generally he would go on his pilgrimage, and then he would stay at the house of a Brahmana. They'd cook for him. You know, he would give him his association, and then he would move on to the next place of pilgrimage. Anyway, this particular Brahmana was, he seemed very distracted, but it was because he was so absorbed in Lord Ramachandra's pastimes that the external world didn't actually make any sense to him. You know, he didn't follow the normal procedures that people in this material world do. So he would say things that seemed out of out of the ordinary and things like that. And so Lord Chaitanya began speaking with him, and he found out that this particular Brahmana was lamenting because he couldn't understand how Ravana could abduct the internal potency of the Lord. It's like, how is it even possible? I don't understand. You know, Ravana, he's an impious, but how, you know, and it's also an allegory for how impious people can receive the favor of the Lord in that sense. But anyway, so he's very confused, and Lord Chaitanya didn't have anything that he could say to make this Brahmana feel better, nothing authoritatively. So he sort of like felt this Brahmana's pain. Anyway, while Lord Chaitanya was then continuing his pilgrimage, he came upon, I think it was the Korma Purana, but I may be mistaken. But in that Purana that he found, it explained that Ravana actually couldn't abduct Sita Devi, and that Sita Devi, she expanded herself in an illusory form that could be taken by Ravana. And so so then Lord Chaitanya, he immediately saw these pages and he actually tore them out of the book and brought them back to this Brahmana to explain it to him so that he wouldn't lament anymore. And that's another thing about Sita Devi, which is a fantastic story. It's a great story.
Yeah, very nice.
But yeah, so sometimes when we see people who are very impious, and it seems like they have, what we consider spiritual, because any opulence comes from Krishna, right? So we see that somehow these, demons are opulent, and we don't understand it, and we become confused. How is it possible that this person who's so demonic, like they're not pious at all, yet they have, they have wealth, they have fame, they have strength, they have, like that, beauty. And they don't actually have the substance, they have the shadow, they have the illusory. It's very temporary and it's very borrowed. Like, it's not the actual quality that they have a reflection of it, and it's only for a short amount of time. So it's nothing that we should become envious of, or or anything like that. That was something. But you actually, sorry, you asked a question first, and then I didn't address it, did I?
Yeah.
What was the question?
Yeah, question. Thank you for this telling us about the real nature of the demons. They have
Yes.
the temporary illusion. The question was, it is at work. Sometimes we have to focus on work, and then
Right, yeah.
think about Krishna.
Yeah. So this is where it becomes a little tricky, because basically the answer is that we are to become detached. So everything comes from Krishna, and we are to understand that. But at the same time, we still have to put forth effort. And so for us, that seems confusing, because we either want to sit back and let Krishna do everything, or we want to do it ourselves. We don't want to continue working with a detached mood, because it doesn't make sense to us. If we're doing it, we want to do it. And if Krishna is doing it, then let him do it. We don't understand this whole spirit of, you have to do the work, but be detached from the result, because Krishna is in charge of that. And that's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to understand. Well, not necessarily understand. It's a tough thing to apply, because of our material conditioning. But so basically what we need to do is, sure, sometimes we need wealth to maintain our family, so we have to have a job. But when we're doing that job, our consciousness can be, I am providing these things for my family, or our consciousness can be, due to in my situation, I have to do this as service to Krishna, and if I do it in the right way and do the rest of my household duties in the proper way, then I'll no longer have to deal with any of this stuff. But it has to be that we understand that the things are coming from Krishna, they're not coming from us, which is hard for us to do, because we're doing the work. I'm the one that's clocking in 9 to 5 at the office. So what's Krishna doing, right? That's our attitude. But it's actually Krishna that's providing these things, and it's designed that way on purpose, because we are meant to understand that, not just understand it in theory, but to actually apply it, to show that yes, we are willing to perform these duties, and we are also detached from it. We have to show Krishna that everything is for him, and we actually have to put forth our best effort. And the test is whether we're considering ourselves the doer, or if we're considering him. And that's where, like I said, it gets tricky. It sounds easy, but then when we go to apply it, and this took me a really long time to start getting the concept. I'm certainly not a master of that concept, but I used to think that if this needs to be done, it has to be done this way, and I can't depend on anybody. And so I would do it like that, because a lot of things that I tried in a collaboration didn't work out, because one of the persons would flake out or whatever. And so I thought I had to do it on my own. And so me thinking I had to do it on my own was a problem, because I wasn't considering the fact that, Krishna is the one that's doing it. So as soon as that change took place in my consciousness, and this came from studying Srimad Bhagavatam, as soon as that change in consciousness took place, where, okay, I still have to continue doing this work, but the results have nothing to do, like whether it succeeds or fails, has nothing to do with my actual work. I can't accomplish anything. So once Krishna it was actually Bhishma Deva that made that clear to me. Once I started doing that in a different mentality, then I started seeing, oh, okay, yeah, this is how it's meant to be. We continue doing our best, but we have to be detached, because Krishna is in control of the results. So we don't sit back and let him do everything, because that's not a sign of faith. That's a sign of laziness. And we don't want to take credit for all of the action we're doing, because that's also not Krishna conscious. That's self-conscious. So both are self-conscious. One's just being lazy, and the other one's trying to take all the credit. We have to understand that both have to happen. We have to give the activity, and we have to be detached. And that's the lesson we learned from the pastime of Damodar, Mother Yashoda, when she went to bind Krishna. She's putting together every rope she found in the house. She kept tying them together, and every time it's 2 fingers too short. And those 2 fingers represented mercy and endeavor. You have to have both. You have to have the mercy of Krishna, and you have to have the endeavor. You can't just, you can't just sit there and expect to bind Krishna. You have to put that endeavor there. And without his mercy, you cannot do it. So you need both. So we have to put forth our best endeavor to serve Krishna. But we also have to understand that nothing I can do can change what Krishna's plan is. And like I said, it's tricky, but that's what we have to do. So
thank you.
sure.
Very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anything else? Yeah, that's one of those topics that can be talked about for such a long time. So like I said, basically it's the topic of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. And it took me 10 years and a whole lot of study and a whole lot of association with devotees and a whole lot of chanting to even start applying that principle. Like I knew the principle and I was trying to apply the principle, but I wasn't successful in it because I was still too attached. We have this concept of, well, if I'm doing the work, I'm doing the work, and we think we're doing it because we see it's the result of something that we did with our body and mind, and like that. But in actuality, that's the whole illusion, is that we can't do anything, because this whole world is illusory, and not a blade of grass moves without his will. So yes, we came up with an idea, and we put forth endeavor, and we did all this, but ultimately it was Krishna that made it happen. If we can't see that, then how are we Krishna conscious? No, we're self-conscious, right? So it's just a matter of that.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. That's what I'm going through right now. I know everything. I read Bhagavatam and other things, but having practical thing, it's taking me time.
Yeah.
That.
And it's nothing to be ashamed of. It takes as much time as we need. And Krishna is fine. He's very patient. And
then as long as I say I am doing, I can do, then Krishna won't help us. So we have to do the Sarvadharman Parityaja, Mamekam Sarvaja. So unless we do that, he won't help us.
Like the sparrow, when we learn about determination, the sparrow that was going to drain the ocean. Sparrow didn't actually drain the ocean, but since she had that determination, then Garuda came and he threatened, "Oh, I'll drain it." Okay, here you go. Here's your babies. My bad. So yeah, that's the thing. We put forth the endeavor, then the impossible happens, and Krishna takes control.
Nice intermediate class. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was all due to the questions, honestly, because clearly I didn't prepare enough. But thankfully, everyone had such nice questions and discussion topics that it continued on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shara Chandra Prabhu. It's very nice.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it very much. Jai. Okay. Vanchakalpatarubhishya kripasindhuvyavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I'll
Everybody
try
have a
to
wonderful
have,
Krishna conscious day.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Kshatrendra, what were you going to say?
No, I was just saying I'll try to have better internet next time.
No, it worked out nicely. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone.